Hi, everybody. Welcome back at the Pagan Show. And today we have Sunshine Witchski. Yep, that's a good name, isn't it? I like that. And she's going to talk to us about a lot of different things. But the most important thing she's going to talk about is her book, Sober Living, Witch's Way. We'll get more exacting titles so I don't butcher it so bad. Um, but also, we're going to talk a little bit about this sort of life, about why she wrote the book, and that is. But let me go ahead and start. What brought you to your pagan path, your witch path?
What brought me to my witch path and Catholicism.
Hmm.
Yeah. I was raised Catholic and I went to Catholic school 13 years of my life, but around the age of 11 years old, I asked our parish pastor, the father, the head of the church, I asked him if I could be an altar girl. And he told me no, not in his house, not in his church. And I was just really kind of disturbed and shocked by that. And so ever since I started to just question what I had been taught and I sought answers for myself. And so around the age of 16 years old, I stumbled into my first metaphysical store. And that was the
Hmm.
first time that I felt like I was at a place that I was welcomed. I was respected for asking questions and challenging things and being curious. And yeah, so I would say that is where my pagan path started was, the Catholic Church kind of found nudged me towards the direction of finding answers myself. Yeah.
And since then, okay, let's go ahead and just get right into it. Your book.
Mhm.
Okay, what is the full title again?
The full title of the book is Sober Witch Life, a magical guide for recovery. Yeah.
A Sober Witch Life, a Magical Guide for Recovery. That's an interesting one because I hate to say it, but the pagan and the witch community out of the 70s, 80s, and 90s was very party oriented, hedonistic. To this day, it's hedonistic. Why do you go to
Mhm.
festivals? For hedonism. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a deep aspect of that. I'm a hedonist. Um, so why would a sober, why sober living? Why is that something that we need?
I think the collective, as far as we need, is a hard thing to say, and that's a hard question to answer. I
Hmm.
believe sobriety and recovery are a very personal journey. I do believe that addiction in and of itself tends to destroy a lot of people's spirit, and that doesn't just
Hmm.
need to be, sobriety from alcohol or drugs. But addiction in and of itself, I think, destroys a lot of people's spirits. It creates a lot of chaos, drama, sorrow, sadness. And so, yeah, the pagan and the witch community, and I've heard this from a lot of different places. It is very often ripe with substance use, right? If it's not alcohol, it's marijuana. If it's not marijuana, it's, mushrooms. If it's not mushrooms, it's alcohol, right? Like it doesn't matter what it is. And from a hedonist, I've described myself as a hedonist for a good portion of my life. Hedonist is the enjoyment of life, right? That's
Hmm.
that's what a hedonist is. But
Right.
that we don't have to use substance as a means of enjoying life. And so there are a lot of folks that I've come across in the pagan and the witch community that they find themselves in a very strange position where they step into traditional recovery programs and they're not exactly comfortable being themselves. Right. They're not comfortable with the pagan conversation. They're not comfortable with the magic, the witchcraft, and the witchcraft and the ritual. And then vice versa, in the pagan and the witch community, they're not exactly embraced for their sobriety or recovery all the time, right? It's it could be very much a, hey, just uh, not a big deal. Like you just choose not to drink here, and it's like, no, I don't enjoy watching people get drunk. Like that's just not an enjoyable experience for me anymore. And
Hmm.
so many of these witches and these pagans and these folks that I have talked to have found they are alone, isolated, ostracized, and that in and of itself often leads people down deeper, darker paths of addiction.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I often say I took two things that are very kind of frowned upon in some ways, right? The recovery piece and then the witchcraft piece, and I shove them together because just like me, there are hundreds, if not thousands of us out there that believe in the practice of witchcraft, believe, in a pagan spiritual path and want to be in substance-free spaces that understand their recovery.
It's very interesting. I know I go to festivals, and there's a lot of spaces for sobriety. They're starting to work on that. So my only major addiction, everybody knows, is coffee. Uh, Socially acceptable, but it is the idea. So I always love the idea that people always talk about vices, and you should only have vices that the public likes. Uh, it's been an old argument. So we hide our addictions versus, if everybody's smoking pot, then it's okay to smoke pot. In fact, if you don't, you're expected not to. But at a lot of festivals, I do see that coming back. I belonged to a temple for a little while, or was with, adjacent, called Chosen Path, and they are completely sober. They don't do anything because they have so many recovering people. They eliminate it from their major rituals and things of that nature. And if they do have alcohol, they announce it ahead of time before they even start, which was eventually eliminated. So I do see people fighting for this idea of sobriety. Uh, so how do we, and witchcraft does not inevitably have a substance-based religion. It's more of education tolerance. There are some, I think, that do have it. I mean, I've been through paths where, through Native American and through some others where they have it, but it's not an addictive level. It's more of a testing level, more of a exercise when done properly. I've never seen alcohol done properly. I
Mhm.
drink. I do drink. I drink socially. Um, so that's interesting. But I was in my early years did smoke. I was drinking until I was 26 years old. I was drinking from the time I was 21 to 26. I was drinking almost a fifth of vodka a day.
Mhm.
And so I understand that. So how does your book help those who are seeking to get sober or have sobriety? Help them. How does it help them? What does it do? What can it do for them?
Well, I do refer to the name of the book, Sober Witch Life. And I myself am a recovering alcoholic, but I share that a lot of what I've written and created is for individuals that are stepping into recovery from anything. So that can be substance, that could be food, gambling, sex, that could even be trauma and codependency, or even just self-abandonment. And so the book itself takes the reader through a bit of my story, right? So that there's a way for them to relate and know that they're not alone in their journey. But even more so, it takes them through a what is very common in the recovery space. Many recovery spaces have steps or a path that you work to kind of step into and embrace your recovery journey. And so the book in and of itself is going to help individuals explore that path from the perspective and the view of a witch.
So let me ask this question. No, I have not read the book yet. I'm looking forward to this is one of the books that are on my list this year. Uh, and I'm covering a lot of books, but this one sounds very interesting. What does it offer to the high priestess, the high priest, or an individual in leadership that are dealing with these issues? Not their own personal addiction, but the addiction of their members, or maybe their own personal addiction as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. And I think that's where some of the story and the perspective that I share around my own story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you know, I have always been in a leadership role, right? As a child, I was a leader in high school, out of high school. And so the story that I share starts to talk about how a lot of people uh, will tend to perform, that they will tend to mask, that they tend to people please. So the sharing of my story puts a perspective to that leader to be able to
Hmm.
see and understand what an individual, that is going through addiction may still on the outside and on the surface look as though they've got everything together, but they're really screaming on the inside for somebody to recognize that they're struggling, that they're lonely, that they need help, right? And a lot of what I teach and the practices that I share in any of the spaces that I'm in is always about learning how to meet an individual where they are. And that's very important in a leadership perspective. I've taught leaders, I've mentored and coached leaders throughout my career,
Hmm.
and it's important. And I've shared this with a lot of folks. It's not about helping somebody else understand how to meet you where you are. It's not about getting them to do what it is that you need. It's about you learning as a leader how to show up for them, that so that they can be the best version of themselves possible. And so telling my story, sharing some of that, even providing the tools that are available in there. If somebody was in the position that they had someone in their coven, their temple, or their space that they recognized was struggling with addiction, they have tools that are available for them through the book, to be able to help.
So one of the things I see in society right now that's very, very important. There's a lot of pressure on to drink. You have the baby boomers, which are the drinking generation. The X generation was the psychedelics, as well as that sort of thing. And we see the millennials were not traditional drinkers, but heavily drinkers that. But now we see the Z generation, and and the liquor companies are really upset because we're now drinking. They're drinking at the lowest level in history. Only 54% drink casualty, and according to the latest survey, only 38% drink on a daily or regular basis.
Yeah.
Alcoholism down amongst them. The first blame, of course, is marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also showing among C that marijuana is also lowering. They're not smoking as much because they're worried about it. The only thing that's up about the Generation Z is that they are taking some more psychedelics. That seems to be a little bit of the craze right now. But we do see this diminishment of alcoholism in our society. And yet our society wants you to drink. I mean, these companies, I mean, Jim Beam just closed down a distillery for a year because they're so awash in liquor that we're starting to see this. Hmm.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with tariffs. This has nothing to do with all of that. This is literally
Yep.
American youth consumption. And as they're growing adults, they don't want it as much. And that's true of the witchcraft community as well. And I find that fascinating. So, what can these individuals who are sober, let's give them some suggestion how to stay sober against this sort of impeding, heavy advertising against it and social pressure.
Yeah, and I'll just there's all sorts of things that are like kind of running through my head as you're talking. And I think about I go back to the cigarette industry, right? The tobacco industry. Because I think we're going to see the exact same thing happen with the alcohol industry, where the tobacco industry, they went ahead and had traditional cigarettes, and what did they do? They started to divert what they there to like the vapes. They started to divert it to the pouches, to other
Hmm.
ways that these drugs would in essence be consumed, right?
Hmm.
And so I see the same thing of the alcohol industry moving into producing the marijuana drinks, moving into producing the low level like adaptogen type of drinks.
Hmm.
Again, all of these things that are meant to regulate our nervous system, help us be social in situations that we might not otherwise want to be in, right? And so for
Hmm.
the individuals that are feeling the pressure as these industries move their target, because that's what's happening, right? The biggest thing that I can always recommend, and I think almost anybody in the recovery space, is going to be connection. Find the places, find the people, right? Find the community that you feel safe in, that you feel seen in, you feel heard in, right? That is what's going to keep you from succumbing to whatever the next drug is that's being sold to you, whatever the next alcohol drink, whatever the next substance is that's meant to take you out of being present in life. That's the way that you do it, is through the connection and the community and finding the spaces that you feel seen and heard in.
It's very easy. Interesting. Stephen Colbert, who is a big person into the flow books. He wrote the book Flow. And also Jason Silver, which is big into this idea of flow, has been talking about this idea of moving that what they call the emotional shifting industry, the transcendental industry, the consciousness industry is like $3 trillion that people spend a great deal of money to shift their consciousness. And they mean alcohol, but they also mean meditation. I mean, so we don't want to stay into our heads. That's a big problem, isn't it? We just
Mm.
don't want to stay in our heads.
No, I mean, or we want to be so lost in our heads
Hmm.
because we don't want to deal with what's present in our physical body, right? We
Hmm.
hold trauma, we hold pain, we hold sorrow, we hold grief. All of these emotions exist within our physical body. And so we go down the path of the alcohol, the drugs, the meditation, right?
Hmm.
Whatever it is. I mean, there are people that are like spiritually bypassing the traumas that they've been present in their life, through just like another breath work thing, right? Another meditation class, another whatever that may be. So you're spot on that there's a lot of money in both the negative escaping
Hmm.
of it, as well as even the like what people would describe as positive escaping of it, all because people don't want to be present in their physical 3D space. I mean, I can't blame them too much. The world that we live in is kind of a mess, right? But this is the world that we live in. This is the one that's calling for us to be present.
I got you. So let me go ahead and back up. So you talk about addictions. I think one of the strongest addictions, I think, and it made the pagan community. It made it very unique. But I think now we're starting to see more toxic elements. I've seen more toxic element, and that is sexuality. We were the broadest, most sexual community. We had, forgiven not just hedonism, but we've forgiven a lot of the actions saying that you want sex, and we made it, friendly. We made it, fun. The jokes about orgies. I mean, polyamory, which is very popular in our community when it's done healthy, but it's also not done healthy. But there's that I think a lot of sexual addiction has gotten buried under sexual positivity or that sort of thing. How do you confront that? I mean, how do you know,
Oh,
I'm saying that's one I think is if there's any addiction in our community, I think that's the deepest one.
yeah, I do, and I do think that it goes hand in hand with a lot of the drug and the alcohol abuse, right?
Hmm.
Um, because there's very few sober communities that I've ever run into that are having like swinging and orgy parties, right?
Okay.
It's not as common. Um, not saying it doesn't happen. It's just and in the addiction and recovery space, there's not only sex addiction, but there's sex and love addiction. And so this is, you're talking about a very complex addiction. Same thing with like food addiction. These are things that we need in life,
Hmm.
right? We need them. Like we need connection. Intimacy is important. Physical intimacy with a partner is important. And so from the spiritualist, the pagan, the witchy, like yes, the divine feminine says be comfortable with your sexuality, right? If you want sex every day, then state it, right? Be willing to like love your body enough to not hide it if that's what you want and desire. But where it becomes damaging is when you have some of these individuals in the space, that are the predators
Hmm.
that can see when somebody is seeking the attention or stepping into their divine feminine for the first time and don't know how to practice it, and they start to use it against them. So you're
Hmm.
spot on that I think it is very prevalent, and how we face these things again as a human being. It's being present in our life. It's recognizing and acknowledging why we're choosing the things that we're choosing, right?
Hmm.
I've identified, and I say this from personal experience, I've identified as polyamorous since I was 22. That was over 23 years ago, 24 years ago at this point.
Hmm.
And at that point, when I was 22 years old, I was the youngest person in all of the polyamorous circles that I was in, right? I was a weird bird, right? None of my friends were into this. And so I've grown up in the space and I've watched how it's shifted and I've watched how it's changed and become more acceptable. And I've looked back even on myself and I've seen that there were times that I was using what I thought was my positive view of my sexuality as a mask to truly become intimate, vulnerable, and seen by someone,
Hmm.
right? So the way that we face this and deal with this, and this is on an individual level, right? Is as an individual, you have to really be conscious and aware of why you're making the choices that you're making, right? Why you're putting yourself in that situation. Now, as a leader,
Hmm.
and I have also seen and been present to some leaders that have chosen to incorporate the sexual nature that is very familiar in the pagan and witch community in
Hmm.
very dangerous and unhealthy ways as well. And so, as leaders, I believe that we have a responsibility to our community, to our covens, to our temples, to the folks that we're around, that when we see it, that we're calling it out. Because there are some folks that are out there that it's not just the sex addiction, they are dealing with a myriad, a bucket filled of trauma, of alcohol addiction, substance, maybe abuse that they're going through. And then you add the sex addiction into the middle of it. And if they find themselves with a coven leader or a spiritual leader that has unhealthy or dangerous sexual undertones in their programs, it's a very dangerous space for them to step into. So we owe it to the communities to call it out when we see it.
And if you want some statistics, we did an interview with Shane Nelson, did the survey, who found that 89% of all pagans suffer from religious trauma,
Mm.
from religious trauma, and that 68% of them, according to his survey, which he continues to work on, says that we continue to have trauma even in the pagan community past our original thing. So you talk about the Catholics, he says that 89% of us carry that. Um, but let me go ahead and take a very opposite approach. One of the biggest complaints against the sober community, as it tries to present itself, is that it's demand that others conform. What do I mean? You can't bring wine to a ritual. You can't have that there at a ritual because there is somebody who's suffering from alcoholism or somebody from some addiction. But now that they've joined the circle, the circle has to go sober. Why? Why? I mean, they ask why. I mean, why cannot that exist side by side?
Um, I think it can,
Hmm.
I think it can exist side by side because it's each individual's decision, right? I'll
Hmm.
give you a perfect example. There's a very large uh event that happens here in Michigan every single year, and it's very highly participated in. And the
Oh,
person that's running it,
you're talking about convocation,
no,
which
there's another one. Nope,
is
there's
there?
another one.
Oh, okay.
There's an yeah, there's and I just out of respect, but
Okay.
it's pretty widely known in the Metro Detroit pagan area. But
Oh,
they
okay.
have a open bar, so you
Oh,
buy a
sure.
ticket and it's an open bar. And I was asked very recently if I wanted to sponsor. And I said, I can't, right? Like I don't have any problem with anybody that goes. There's no issue, right? Like this is
Hmm.
perfectly fine. I know there are people that drink and want to drink. I said, I just can't support an event that has an open bar. That's just my values. And so the same thing, right,
Hmm.
is if somebody didn't want to be around the alcohol, they should just not go. You don't have to ask for a circle or a space to not have it, right? I think it's each individual's own responsibility to so-called police what they're comfortable with and what they're not. It's I don't think that I do think what you're referring to is when it becomes when somebody else is requiring someone to manage the space because they can't manage their own sobriety, right? It'd be like
Hmm.
me going and asking this place to not have the open bar just so that I could attend. No, I
Right.
just don't attend, right? That's cool.
Hmm.
I don't enjoy it. I just don't enjoy it. It's not a place that I find enjoyment in. So I won't choose to go, but I'd never expect or ask them to make a change. Yeah.
So I find that there are groups, the smaller the group, the more likely they're to make these changes because they want to be good to people. I get that. Chosen Path did that. I mean, at the end of the day, they started out having a little bit, and by the time I departed there, they were they were dry. I mean, they were dry, and everybody knew it. And the majority of people stayed with that. So the idea of it being dry doesn't mean you run away people. People may want to do that because they do like that sort of energy. So it's an individual choice of each individual group, and it sounds like it's an individual choice
Yeah.
for individuals. So um, this is very interesting. This is intriguing. Um, which is Sober Life? Sober Witch Living. There you go. How did you get this book?
You can find Sober Witch Life directly on Amazon. You can also find it on Barnes and Noble if you're anti-Amazon. You can come to me directly, and I actually would give you a signed copy then. So you can go to SoberWitch.life and you can buy the book directly from the website there. So any of those ways, and it's available on Amazon as both a paperback hardcover as well as their e-reader as well.
Hmm. Well, there's, yeah, Amazon, the iGod machine, interdimensional goods on demand. Uh, it has to do with, I really truly believe that that part of that system. And I find it very useful. I mean, I do find it useful, but I can understand why people want to cut back on that.
Mhm.
Mhm. I always say, as we always say, go to your local bookstore. If they don't have it, ask them if they can order it. The more that
Yep.
people see that you're ordering these books, the more that they can increase the amount of books locally, where the dollars go locally. I'm very
Yeah.
big into that. I Sober Life, SoberWitch.life, is that?
Yeah, that's the website you can get it off of. Yep.
SoberWitch.life. I love that. And so you can go get that and get signed copies. But yeah, again, I have nothing against Amazon. Barnes& and Noble is making its big comeback. They're building a new 30,000 bookstore, foot bookstore in Chicago. Of
Are
all the,
they?
they are
Oh, yeah. Okay.
downtown Chicago. They were downtown
Oh,
Chicago
nice.
20, and now they're building a 30,000 foot bookstore, coffee house, entertainment center.
Exciting. Exciting. Yeah,
Uh,
I visit Chicago often, so I'll look forward to seeing it one of these
yeah,
days.
yeah, and so
I
it's
am the book is in a couple of stores around the Midwest.
hmm.
Um, I'm working on clarifying with all the stores whether or not they still have copies so I can post them. So I should have that up on the website too, here within the next couple of weeks. If you do want to make sure that it's usually the metaphysical stores versus the actual bookstores. Some of the bookstores have been a little bit harder to get in front of just because of the way a couple of them operate. But yeah, there's a couple of stores in the Midwest too. I can't remember if I've got them in Chicago, if there's any in Chicago.
It would
I'll have
be
to.
you have to check the Malloway Brothers, one of the best
I've
shops in
t-
the city.
oh, I know. I've talked with Eric, and I'm hoping to
Yeah.
see that they're supposed to be at convocation. So,
So,
yeah,
are you presenting at Convocations this year?
yeah, I am.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, so if people don't know, Convocation is probably one of the oldest and well-run event in the Midwest. It's usually in February. It used to be the month after Pantheacon. It would be the second chance you would have. I mean, it's in the middle of winter next month, February.
Hmm.
Well, what used to be winter, we're in the middle of, yeah, we're 50 degrees today uh, in January. That's, that sort of thing. Um, And it's interesting because Convocation is where you get to see a lot of authors. It's a very book-oriented event. So if you like books and indoors versus the outdoors, it's a good event to go to. I think there's still chances to buy tickets. You should check it out. I do know they're already filling their second hotel. The main hotel is full. So it's a lot of people out there. Um, and it's interesting because they too have a bar, not an open bar, but they do have a bar. But I will say for convention, it's not as occupied as some. So let me go ahead and so what are you presenting there?
I will have three different sessions that I'm doing. The
Hmm.
one is is a workshop I call High Vibes, Hard Truths, and I talk about kind of the affliction of addiction on us
Hmm.
witches, mystics, psychics, highly sensitive individuals, right? And we get into a
Hmm.
little bit of the generational kind of traumas and things of that nature. The second thing is I have a ritual that I have been doing for about over a year and a half now.
Hmm.
In the book, the 13th step, it's because it's actually 13 steps, is to do ritual to help heal the world of addiction. And so
Hmm.
we'll be doing ritual together as a community for those that join, um, to do just that, to try to like raise the vibration and release some of the hold that addiction has. And then the third is this year's theme is as above, so below, the Hermetic
Hmm.
principle. And so I'll be doing this really lovely, um, deeply embodied meditation to kind of have us get a taste of as above, so below. So,
I'm a big fan of that concept myself.
mhm.
Um, and I warn people. So another conversation is, I believe in AI and I believe so within, so without.
I do too.
That's sort of the idea of it. So how we develop our paradigms, how we develop our stories is important. And it sounds like you've got a really good handle on this. So thank you. I think, you can go out convocation to see. You can find, let's say it right, SoberWitch.life, her website.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure
And
did.
so then you can buy the books, you can talk to them. Do you offer counseling service or can you recommend counseling services for those who need more help?
I definitely can recommend a couple of areas in the Midwest to talk
Mhm.
to. From a counseling service perspective, I'm not a licensed counselor, but I can offer you peer support. I can do that one on one. And I do have a program that I refer to as the Recovery Coven that operates out of the nonprofit, which is, a whole group of us that are kind of on these healing recovery journeys and practicing, the path of the witch along the way. Yeah.
I said all along the Pagan community is a trauma eating and healing community. It's why
Yeah.
we're not as big in politics. It's not why we're not in a lot of different spaces because we're much more oriented towards the emotional and the intellectual repair versus life repair sometimes.
Yeah.
I will say it. Most people who come to paganism want a better mental and emotional life. And it sounds like you're
Yeah.
providing that.
I like to think so. Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
people definitely share that sentiment back with me. So I know it's done a lot for me, and I can only imagine the impact that I'll continue to have. I feel very blessed.
And so, any last thoughts you want to share with our audience, especially Generation Z, which is walking away um, from this? I mean, I'm seeing that a lot because we've already talked about it.
Yeah, the biggest thing is you're hearing us talk a bit, and we're talking about the alcohol use, we're talking about the substance use, but addiction in and of itself shows up in ways that we don't always realize. It shows up in the workaholism, it shows up in the constant rebellion, it shows up in the self-abandonment that we make. where we choose to not do things because society, culture, or family wouldn't agree. And so, even though you may not be picking up a substance, be conscious that your addictive behaviors or the traumas that have been throughout your generational past may sneak up on you in ways that you don't quite realize.
That's pretty good advice. And workaholism is the world's
Mm-hmm.
most accepted addiction.
Yep.
It is. People, you can say, "Oh, I'm a workaholic," and people, "Oh, that's good." No, as a
No,
workaholic,
I say I'm a recovering alcoholic, workaholic, perfectionist, and control freak. Yep.
and there we go. And so there we go. We're with Sunshine Witchki, uh, uh, Sober Witch Life. See that, boy, that gets like that's a tongue twister a little bit. And you can find her at SoberWitch.life and check her out at Convocation next month. I
Yeah.
expect to see a lot more people. I'm hoping to get some interviews out of Convocation. It's a
Awesome.
big event in the in the Midwest. More importantly, Michigan. It's well worth the trip. With that, folks, I want to thank you for being here. I definitely will have Sunshine back on throughout the year. As you know, I've committed to 365 uh, single broadcasts to kind of bring our community to conversation because these are the conversations we need to have. I know there are a lot of people who do a great job out there teaching theology, tradition. And I'm going to leave them to it. What I want to talk about is how we're going to connect our community and get better quality services to our people as we start to grow into our next phase of maturity. And thank you for being here and being part of my journey.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
And blessing everybody. We'll be back.